Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kojimapowered, and thank you very much for joining me for another high polyphase time-lapse. This time, I'm featuring a rendition of Danny Pennington, played by teen actor Michael Turney, as seen in the 1990s live-action feature film, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The story is straight out of the 80s. Danny is a misguided yet redeemable youth whose choices have earned him a record as a juvenile delinquent. He's treated as just another responsibility and feels that his father sees him as a lost cause. His only sanctuary is among a den of thieves. They feed him and accept him, all the while grooming him to be a member of the Food Ninja. It's worth mentioning that after Ninja Turtles the movie, Michael Turney mysteriously vanished. His whereabouts are unknown. However, his name has appeared in very obscure productions based in Australia. I suspect he was involved with the radio show The Action Room back in 2007. More recently, IMDb has credited him for directing the films The Portal, The Little, and Normal. I'm not certain if it's the real McCoy, as the true identity of this mysterious director is completely concealed, save for a mark, or a tattoo, of two opposing arrows. Anyway, I should get on with my creative process of Danny Pennington from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 1990s film. The goal of this time-lapse is going to be a little different. This time, I wanted to record myself incorporating an alternative method into my workflow, rather than refining what I'm already familiar with. I want to demonstrate to my followers and detractors that I'm always improving. However, the guidelines of improvement are unique in 3D because, even though you put the time and effort into it, your end product is always limited by your knowledge and boundaries of the program. So, hair in Next-Gen is a gap in knowledge that I've been meaning to fill for some time in Maya. Keep in mind now that there's no one way to handle hair. This is just me exploring an available method. Eventually, I plan to include a link of a polished render below, but lately I've just been sidetracked by other projects. There's always just something else new to do or something else to try, and it's a really bad mentality to fall into because, in so doing, I'm always neglecting my portfolio. It's just that I prefer to make time-lapses because I see more value in the creative process rather than the finished piece. It's much more intimate and honest, even if my methods might be lacking sometimes. Anyway, in between the phases of modeling, I was sifting through hours and hours of tutorials to try to find the right method to incorporate. While tutorials are good starting points for learning hair, their styles are formulaic, and I wanted to challenge myself with something out of the ordinary. Obviously, the first step to starting hair is to find a model to base your hair from. I recommend it be of a real person in order to gauge the likeness. It takes me hours to choose anything in art. All of the examples of hairstyles I kept finding were so deliberately styled by professional artists, and I needed my choice to be, spontaneous. It was of sheer happenstance that I chose Michael Turney from Ninja Turtles of all people, but I thought that he was perfect for my challenge in that there's nothing standard or prefabbed about his hair. It's completely tousled, yet it's swept with waves of tapering curls, and that just sounded vaguely homoerotic. Oh god. His hair had a hue that burned in a halo of fiery stray hairs. Anyway, I started at the base by extruding several polygonal faces that best resembled the flow of the hair. You want to exaggerate the waves you want to be the most prominent. Now, it's not necessary to go overboard with the detail or topology. All the polygonal hair is sacrificial geometry. It's just a base to paint your hair curves on. Now, even though my poly count is low, hair always carries with it the propensity for chaos, and you have to nip that shit in the bud lest it spread and contaminate everything that you've worked for. I went about this by consolidating the forms that lended themselves into one mesh, and then hiding it, and then just working my way to the waves, and then curls, and then stray hairs. You want to put every type of hair on its own layer. It's a tedious process that I'll spare you from by jumping to the Shredder Claw. Is it just me, or is the infamous Shredder Claw jump scare the most iconic shot of the movie? It's the first scene that comes to my mind when I think of Ninja Turtles. I don't know why, because Danny was just some butthead teen who got mixed up in the Foot Clan. Come to think of it, I suppose that the other scene was Master Tatsu kicking the shit out of that other guy who let his guard down and said, "Never lower your eyes to an enemy." I mean, it's not really that iconic. It's just really good advice, actually. It's a really dope slogan. Never lower your eyes to an enemy, kids. And that's the message I want to say to my child audience. Anyway, the claw was looking a little bit basic, so I decided to take some liberties with the design. Does anyone like the new design of the Shredder from the new movies? I mean, I'm sure my younger viewers do, but I think that they went too far with upgrading him for modern audiences. There was something mystical about Shredder that was lost, and I think that the mystique is explained through technology, and it kind of hurt the character, in my opinion. I advise anyone to check out the original Turtles movie. Now, it's almost 30 years old, so I imagine that a lot of the context might be lost on younger viewers. But Turtles borrow references from the late 70s and 80s pop culture, and Danny Pennington wouldn't be recognizable without his Sid Vicious shirt. You might have noticed that Danny only wore Sex Pistols t-shirts. It's no big deal now, but in the day, punk rock culture was the target of condemnation, and it really shaped my views on conformity and authority.
Right. My personal view on punk rock is that it's nauseating, disgusting, degrading, ghastly, sleazy, prurient, voyeuristic, and generally nauseating. I think that just about covers it as far as I'm concerned. I think most of these groups would be vastly improved by sudden death. The worst of the punk rock groups, I suppose, currently are the Sex Pistols. They are unbelievably nauseating. They are the antithesis of humankind. I would like to see somebody dig a very, very large, exceedingly deep hole and drop the whole bloody lot down it. You know, I think the whole world would be vastly improved by their total and utter non-existence.
Have mercy!
History lesson and disclaimer. Blatant offense has resulted from all postmodern forms of expression. Punk isn't unique. Early punk counterculture originated in the 1960s. It's part lifestyle, part art form. The reason Sid Vicious was such a controversial phenomenon is there's nothing sexy or liberating about being politically correct. No artist that has anything unique to say gravitates towards a culture where they're coerced into conformity, or told which ideas are permissible to disagree. He's not a figure whose content of expression I'd appropriate. However, I find that his life enriched the epistemic necessity of irreverence against immutable certainties governing freedom and discord. Like him or not, Sid was as gross as he was iconic. And the same can be said about the concept of sewer-dwelling mutant freak turtles if you really want to think about it. But I wanted to channel some of that same grungy, primal graffiti look in my texturing. I saw it as a chance to paint outside the UVs. Anyway, the Sid and Nancy graphics served as a hyperbolic analogy implying that Danny's affinity towards counterculture would send him spiraling on a path of self-destruction. The movie followed Eastman and Laird's original canon in that the Foot Ninja were originally humans and not machines. The exploding robot ninja soldiers were a fabrication tailored for child-friendly audiences. Anyway, I digress. After setting my project folder correctly, it was finally time to convert my low-poly hair into X-Gen. I started painting my would-be hair guides along the general contour of the form. My plan was to convert those strokes into curves, and then those curves into groomable hair guides. It works best if you have a stylus, but if you don't, and a mouse isn't working out for you, you can substitute EP curves for pretty much the same effect. Just remember that the hair's growth always follows the direction of the curves, and the more curves that you have, the more control you have over how the hair flows. Danny's hair ended up being around, about 100 groomable hair guides. After sinking a day into it, I learned that most of the styling in X-Gen was a back and forth of adding and deleting hair guides, and painting density and clumping maps. Ironically, most of the quote-unquote styling of the hair was actually just mild tweaking of my initial hair curves. It's worth mentioning that whenever you create a new map, the default resolution is 5, and I set mine to 50. It's important to name all of your clumping and density maps into something that you can recognize. The maps save to your X-Gen folder. Oh, and also, be sure to save your progress. There is nothing worse than spending hours and hours carefully grooming hair only to have the program crash. That is the opposite of cowabunga. That is uncowabungific. Yeah, uncowabungific. Looking at it now, I suppose the grooming of the eyebrows better showcases what I meant by tweaking the hair guides and density maps. And sorry that I neglected to mention this earlier, but there are two separate hair descriptions on two separate surfaces. One is for the hair on top of the head, and the other is for the eyebrows. And both of the eyebrows share the same description and surface. I suppose you don't have to, but I just think that it's a bad idea to have a hair system attached directly to a model's base mesh, if the model isn't a furry character, or a hairy character or something. All in all, the difficulty of the eyebrows comes from the tedium. We really have to commit to the subject matter. Now, I'm sure there's some wise ex-Gen guru out there who knows an easy way to mirror the guides, but I am not him, so I brute forced that sucker. Even though the goal of the project was to familiarize myself with the basics of Next Gen, I couldn't resist dropping in a simple rig to make Danny posable in relation to the Shredder Claw. It's just the subtle ingredient lacking in capturing the spirit of the shot. Anyway, it's about time that I bring an end to this video. Not too shabby for my first time. Now, it's just a bust this time, but I can't wait to try out everything that I learned on a complete model. With that said, thank you for your time, and there's someone out there, I'll never say who, I want to express an additional heartfelt thanks to that one amazing person who was willing to, take a chance on me.